Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and it's officially the season. Opening day was sensational. It was a joy watching all of these games, and it's been even better having baseball every day since April 1st. But hope everyone is doing well and staying safe. My folks actually just left town, and now it's back to the grind. It was great having them in town, but I will say I'm excited for things to slowly start to open up around here in Pittsburgh, because they've actually just started allowing a max capacity of 75% in establishments. So it'll be nice to go out and do things, obviously be safe about it, but good to get out of the house and go do stuff since we've been cooped up for most of the last year or so. But anyways, folks, let's get into today's show. I want to get into a little opening day recap, some trade talks, and everything in between. So I'll first get right into any of the latest news going around the league to fill everybody in on, since there have been some big developments, I would say, in the baseball world. I'll then get into a recap from opening day and discuss the different games and just my thoughts from the first day of the season. And then later on in the third segment, I'll get into a prediction of who I could see being in first place in each of the divisions by the All-Star break this year. And then make sure, as always, that you stick around for the final segment today as I get into which players we could see being on the move and on the trading block come trade deadline. So we've got a jam-packed show, a really, really good one. But I want to get right into the latest news that comes from the Mets camp, as they now have signed Francisco Lindor to a whopping 10-year, $341 million deal. 10 years, $341 million. That is a large sum of money. And he wanted the deal done. I remember I had come on the show before and mentioned this. He wanted the deal done before April 1st because he did not want to have any contract negotiations in the season and during the season. He said it wouldn't have been fair to his teammates, wouldn't have been fair to him, and he would have had to reserve everything for after the season. And so it was good that they cut it really, really close. But it's good that they were able to settle on something. Both parties were both very happy from what it seems like. And Steve Cohen, as the new owner, I mean, hey, I think he is really whipping this team into shape. I mean, he's really done a nice job at turning this team around, this whole franchise. Like I mentioned, going out and hiring the law firm to kind of investigate the conduct that goes on internally. You go out now, you've got this franchise player with you. You make a bunch of moves in the offseason. Hey, I mean, things are on the up and up for the Mets, I would think. And Pete Alonso actually kind of joked on social media, and he said that he hoped that the Mets would give him like $400 million or something like that. But, I mean, kind of close, right? Not terribly close, but much closer than it would be if it was $150 million, right? But this is the third largest deal in MLB history behind Mike Trout and Mookie Betts. So a large, large contract. And the contract includes the contract is limited to a no-trade clause, that's what it includes, and then a zero opt-outs as well, so making Lindor pretty much a Met for life. I mean, ties him up in New York, but I think he wanted to be there for a long, extended period of time. And now this could be the richest contract in MLB history for a shortstop by $1 million over Tatis. So literally just $1 more million that Lindor just signed for is the difference between having the largest contract for a shortstop, because Tatis had it before, and now Lindor has it. And it's going to be, I think, a huge couple of years in New York. I think Lindor will be the centerpiece and the face of this team for many years. And quite frankly, I think in the next 10 years, the Mets win a World Series, or at least get to the World Series. I don't know if they'll necessarily, win 2 or 3 or 4, but I could see them winning at least one. You would think that they would win at least one, or you would hope at least. But I want to now get into this other piece of news. It's a very interesting concept, and as we all here know, baseball is trying to revolutionize itself, right? Baseball is trying to do anything and everything it can to become more action-packed, to become more exciting. There's more action in the field. They're trying to reduce the strikeout rates and the walk rates. And it's actually this concept I'm going to get into. I heard it first on Pardon the Interruption with Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, and it's an idea that could be revolutionary to the game, and it involves moving the mound back a foot or so to increase the percentage of balls in play and decrease the exponential number of strikeouts that occur. So right now, and it's been like this for many, 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 many years, 60 feet 6 inches is the distance in which the pitching mound is to the plate. Now, Theo Epstein, the former executive for the Cubs, he's been kind of on the forefront working with the MLB of wanting to change the game and bring more action to baseball because, again, many people are kind of annoyed with how slow baseball is, how baseball has just kind of turned into a pitcher's game, and many of the players have even, and especially hitters, have come out and said that it's kind of annoying how they have such little time to react to pitches, and guys are getting even better and bigger and stronger and throwing even harder, and the game has not necessarily adjusted to those pitchers. And Epstein doesn't want major changes. He doesn't want to completely change baseball. He just wants subtle ones that will kind of gradually get implemented over time, and then as a result, people will become a little bit more used to it, and it will also start to kind of go along with the development of baseball as a whole. And the issue that people, again, are having is that there's just no action. There's zero action. Not to mention the strikeout rate is at an all-time high. In 1990, the strikeout rate was at 15%. It's almost to 25% now. That's a 10% jump in 30 years. That's a pretty sizable jump, if you ask me. And he says moving the mound back would actually allow these hitters to have more response time to hitting, and it also balances out the strikeout rate. So it does a multitude of things, and I think that is what's really good about kind of Epstein's mentality, is that he's looking to try and better baseball. He's not necessarily trying to completely change it. He's not trying to completely alter it. He's trying to revolutionize it and change it in a way in which people are going to be more excited to watch it, and those just general fans, not those diehard fans, but those general fans are going to want to stick around and watch games and maybe become the diehard fans that there are out there. And pitchers have started, again, to develop quicker with the shortened mound and velocity on fastballs. I mean, they're at, again, an all-time high. From 2008 to 2020, the average speed of a four-seam fastball, all fastballs combined, breaking balls combined, and all off-speed pitches combined increased by 1.5 to 2 miles an hour. So again, another instance to show that pitchers have started to really, I would say, advance. They've started to advance quicker than the game of baseball has. And this is something that has happened in sports many, many years. And I don't mean to draw sports correlations, but I'm going to do it. Wilt Chamberlain was such a force down low in basketball that they had to change the lane for him. They had to change the size of the lane. They had to implement 3 seconds. They had to do something because he was just too dominant and it was not enjoyable to watch. It's the same thing here. We have pitchers that are just too dominant. We've got guys like Garrett Cole. We've got guys like Justin Verlander or Josh Hader or whomever it might be that are pumping 97, 98, 99, and then you've got guys like Aroldis Chapman that are pumping 100 miles an hour, and the reaction time is minimal. It's literally no time to react. And then you also have to admit, or at least acknowledge, that pitchers are much taller nowadays. Pitchers are much taller. They've got longer arms. They've got longer release points, bigger hands. So as a result, when they're actually releasing the ball, the ball is not necessarily coming from 60 feet 6 inches. It's actually coming about 54.5 feet from the plate. So that's it. I mean, it gives 6 inches less of reaction time for hitters. And as a result, the ball's going to be coming in much quicker than it would if the mound had been moved back maybe a foot or so. Now, I don't really know if the mound being moved back is necessarily the exact thing that they need to do, because if they do that, are they going to extend the base paths? Are they going to move that back a foot? I feel like if you're going to do that, you're going to have to do it for everything, right? You're going to have to completely, I don't want to say completely overhaul, but you're going to have to completely revitalize and revamp everything in a baseball field, because it's going to have to stay tailored to where the pitching mound is, I feel. But that's just me. But the biggest argument that the game needs to adjust to the players and just how it's how it is today, right? I mean, players have increasingly developed their skill, but they've also gotten bigger. There's been a more emphasis on strength and weightlifting, and as a result, pitchers are going to be at a much higher point than they were probably in the 1960s and the 1970s. Again, this would be a very interesting thing to have happen. I don't know if that's necessarily, because I think that there are more rules that need to be implemented, but there's also a fine line. And Theo Epstein even talked about in the article I was reading. He said that he doesn't want to hinder baseball's development. He doesn't want to harm the game. He doesn't want to implement too many changes that would maybe deter or detract fans in general, but also those diehard fans because of just the overhaul in rules. And so you have to go about this in a very calculated way. And if not, again, you could lose a lot of people's interest in the sport, and that's already starting to happen. And I'm going to get into it in a minute here because really I think a lot of this boils down to is an age thing. It's an age gap we have right now, right? People that are in my age range, so 18 to 35, they are more looking for the action. They want the high-powered offense. I mean, I'll get into it, but on opening day, there was, the Rangers and the Royals combined for 24 runs. People want to see that. Now, I personally am not a fan of when it's 17 to 15, or I'm not a huge fan of that. I mean, I do like it. It is very action-packed, but I don't think of it as baseball. I think of that as like a low-scoring football game, a defensive grind in a football game. I would like to see games that are like in the maybe 9 to 7 range, the 10 to 8 range, the 6 to 7 range, something like that when you're scoring still combined double-digit runs, but it's not nearing 30 total runs between two teams. But there's also fans that are a little bit older or in an older age range, so from 40 to 60, that like baseball the way it is. They like the slower pace. They like the inactiveness on the base paths and so on and so forth. And a lot of these rules are being implemented, again, in the minor leagues. You see things where the base paths are starting to shrink just because they're increasing the size of the bases. You've got robotic umpires calling balls and strikes. All of the, and they're limiting the amount of shifts that you can have. All of these things are trying to work itself into baseball in a way to make the game a little bit more fascinating, a little bit more interesting. And I'm glad that this year they're sticking with the man on second starting in the extra innings. I think that is very interesting, and I personally think that's going to make games a lot more exciting. And it's also because, I love an 18-inning game. I really do. So I don't fall in this classification. But there are people that don't like that are bored after the 12th inning. They're like, okay, let's get on with it. Somebody win, and let's get home. I get that. I really do. And Theo Epstein, even in the article, he understood why people might have a pushback on some of this stuff. He completely understood that. And I think that is another thing that because he's so in tune with what people want, he loves the game of baseball, and he's got a great relationship with players, I think that he's going to figure something out that's going to help this game along and help this game, again, kind of develop and advance and evolve, if you will, into the future because, let's face it, there's a lot of things that are going on in baseball now that did not happen in the 60s, and one of them is, and I'm going to get into it in a minute, is statistics and analytics. And I'm going to wrap up the first segment here with this article I read. It's about a little poll that The Athletic conducted for fans. And they discussed what fans like and dislike from baseball in recent years. So again, going back to the rules thing, what they do and don't like. And the survey found that 90% of avid fans and 80% of all fans feel analytics have started to take over baseball. I hate to say this, but I completely agree. I think that there is a certain point where analytics does overdrive and kind of overpower the sport. And I feel like that's what happened. And you see it in other sports, right? When they call it kind of, you're playing the numbers game. That's kind of the big saying nowadays. You're playing the numbers game. And it means that you're doing something, or you're putting somebody in play. You're putting somebody on the field, on the court, wherever, that you're doing it based off of a statistic or a number that somebody ran, and it comes out in a positive fashion and something that intrigues you. And you're not doing it based on the sheer talent and who is able to perform at that level, right? That's kind of the biggest thing, is that a lot of this deals with it's a dichotomy. It's kind of this, and I get it. I mean, you have somebody that is specializing in analytics, and they say this guy is going to be your guy that you want in the 8th inning because he does X, Y, and Z in the 8th inning, but then you've got this other guy on your team that's actually a really good pitcher. He hasn't been pitching great, but his numbers are not like that in the 8th inning. You put the guy that's got great numbers in the 8th inning, and he implodes in the first 3 times you put him in the 8th inning in 3 different games. All of a sudden, you're kind of looking at the analytics guy like, what happened? And that's the issue. When the analytics is wrong, I don't know if there's really an answer for why it was wrong. And that's, I think, what would be the most frustrating thing for me as a coach, as a manager, having to understand that you're going to have to deal with the analytics being wrong, and that's that. I don't think the analytics should have the last final word, and so I do fall in that 90% of avid fans that would like analytics to take a little step back, because there are guys that are going to step up and be clutch and get locked in, because, again, at that point, it's not necessarily about analytics. It's just about a mentality that players will have. Are they capable of handling the pressure in that high-pressured situation? It's stuff like that. It's not necessarily, can this guy, is his number like this for this statistic in this situation of the game that we can put him in? It's not like that. It should be, okay, this guy is great in this pivotal situation. We need to have him in play at some point. And then the survey went on to say over half of MLB fans actually find the pace of game to be just fine. And only 28% said it was too slow. So some people might not want the mound to be moved back. Some people might be okay with where it's at right now. And 66% of the fans feel the MLB shouldn't make any more changes. So although analytics seems to be overpowering baseball, people don't want the rules to change. And I think that there kind of has to be some sort of hand-in-hand change with the rules, but then also with just the general analytics of things. Because I think analytics is forcing the game to change, or vice versa. They're kind of helping each other along. And so I feel that if analytics takes a step back, then we might see a stepping back of rules being implemented, but who knows? And again, it just comes down to a generational divide. Older fans want the game to stay the same. Younger fans, they want the big-time change. They want rules to be revolutionized and revitalized. And so as a result, you kind of have this split. And it goes back to new, and, I think there's a lot of people that would like to see baseball have some sort of new rules, even if it is those older range fans. I do think, though, at the same time, that there's some things about the game of baseball that are unique that need to stay the way they are because it's a unique sport. And I think that if you start messing with it too much, that's when you're going to, again, start deterring people for, wanting to do that and for, changing the game and deterring people from watching, right? And who knows? I mean, the MLB might overstep a boundary. They might try and elicit too much change, right? I know Epstein had said that he doesn't want that to happen, and he does worry that there could be too much change, but that could happen. If you don't take your foot off the gas a little bit and kind of slow down and realize, okay, what do we have here? What's in front of us right now? Do we have everything that we need to change this game, or are we trying to rush the process? Are we trying to skip steps 1 through 6 and go to steps 7 through 10? It's a very, very hard thing to do. I couldn't imagine having to change the rules of a sport this far along in the game of the sport, right? I mean, the game of baseball has been around since the 1800s, and we're in the 2020s. So right there, it's literally America's pastime, right? It's literally, that's what it's called. So some things have to stay unique. Some things I think should change. It's going to find that balance. And if they can find that balance, if Theo Epstein can figure out that balance, I think they'll be just fine. I really, really do. But we'll have to see. Anyways, folks, that's going to do it for us in our first segment. But don't go anywhere, because when I get back from the commercial break, I'll get into an opening day recap and share my thoughts from the games around the league on the first day of the season. Folks, stay right there. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer with you all, and in our first segment, I got into the latest news going around the league and touched on quite a bit on the potential rule changes that are going to happen or could happen in baseball. But make sure you stick around for the final few minutes of the show today, as I'll get into discussing which players could be dealt and on the move in trades come the trade deadline this year. I want to now get into and give a little whole opening day breakdown, if you will, and recap, and just discuss some things I saw from the games I watched, but also from around the league. So I only was able to watch because I just have kind of the typical cable package. I was only able to watch the Blue Jays and the Yankees, and then I got to see the Dodgers and the Rockies. I obviously, local TV, got to see the Pirates and the Cubs a little bit, but I did see a couple innings of the A's and Astros game, and then I wound up going to bed. But I did watch quite a bit of baseball. I have to say it was probably the most baseball that I have watched since probably the season. So I'll jump right into the first game, Toronto and the Yankees. And Blue Jays and Yankees was actually a really good game to watch. It was a solid pitching duel, I would say, early on. Hyun-Jin Ryu came out, really, really humming early on. He is a very good pitcher. I forgot how good of a pitcher he was because I'm so used to him being on the Dodgers and whatnot. And now that he's on the Blue Jays, I kind of forget about him. But he's such a talented pitcher, and he's got such a wide range of pitches that he uses. And not to mention, he had a great defense behind him. Marcus Semien had an incredible play at one point or another. Kevin Biggio had a huge web gem play as well. But the Blue Jays were aggressive offensively early on from what I noticed. And I could just tell with how they seemed to just attack Garrett Cole, and they did not have any fear. Teoscar Hernandez had a humongous home run, wound up tying the game up at 2 because Gary Sanchez had a really big home run himself that was able to put the Yankees up ahead 2-1. The Blue Jays scored early on, got a little bit all over Garrett Cole, but then he was able to settle down. Garrett Cole actually had 7 Ks through 4 innings, so he pitched very well. He pitched really, really well, and I think people expect him to be kind of this lights-out guy, and he is a lights-out guy. I would say he's a lights-out guy, and when he's not performing at the level that I think people expect him to, I think they automatically just think he's not good. And I don't know why that is, because he's a great pitcher. He's a phenomenal pitcher. He had a couple rising fastballs that were touching 97, 98 into the 4th and 5th inning. He was going further. And again, they haven't been playing baseball for a couple months now. So, and I even remember hearing some of the guys on TV, I think it was Eduardo Perez or Tim Kirchin, one of the two, and they mentioned, don't be shocked if you're going to see a lot of just 5-inning outings the first couple games for some of these pitchers that are still trying to work themselves back into a 162-game grind. They don't want to burn themselves out at this point. That's the problem. That is the issue. And I think that is a smart thing to do because guys, their arms are not adjusted to going back to what it was before the pandemic. And you don't want to have somebody have a stress fracture or a stress injury by June. So I think having 5-inning, 6-inning outings early on is a very smart move. But again, back into the game, I got to give Gary Sanchez a lot of credit because from what I hear, he's lost a lot of weight, changed his catching catching crouch, his catching position, and a huge home run. And that was really the main action, right? Teoscar Hernandez's home run. And quite frankly, I really hope that Teoscar has another really big year. I think it's a great thing that he started out with a home run early on in the season. I think that, he had a great year a season ago. He was actually one of my favorite players from 2020 that really kind of blew up and burst on the scene. I hope he can continue that on into 2021. He's got a great swing, a quick swing, lots of power. He generates a ton of power actually behind it. But I was kind of concerned for the Blue Jays once Hyun-Jin Ryu exited the game because, and it was a great point. I can't remember if Eduardo Perez or Tim Kirchin said it, but they said that the main issue, and it's very true, the main issue the Blue Jays have right now is who they're going to rely on pitching-wise when it's Ryu to Ryu. So when they go from the top of the rotation with Ryu and then back to Ryu, those 4 other starters, who are they going to go to? Who's going to be their reliable arm that's going to save them? I think on opening day, their bullpen saved them. The bullpen was huge for both teams. I got to give a lot of credit to O'Day for the Yankees. He had a great outing when he was in. I got to give a lot of credit to Merriweather for the Blue Jays. He had a great inning, got them out of the bottom 9. He was actually in a huge bottom 9 jam, and he was able to get out of it, forced an extra inning situation. Randall Grichuk wound up doubling in the top of the 10th. scored the kind of deciding run, if you will, made it 3-2, but a ginormous win behind the Blue Jays bullpen. I've got to give a lot of credit to them. They came in arm after arm, held their own, whether it was the top, the middle, or the bottom of the lineup. They were not phased at all, and that's going to be something that is a question mark, I think, for this Blue Jays team, is what the rest of their starting pitching can do, because Ryu can't do it all, and what their bullpen can do, because they've taken some hits with their bullpen. George Springer, unfortunately, out for about 10 days, I believe, with an oblique strain, so he was not able to play, so we didn't get to see him in his Blue Jays debut. But nonetheless, a great win for the Blue Jays. But then getting into the Dodgers and Rockies game. Now, this was an interesting game, a very interesting game, and I don't know if it was the weather or what, but the Dodgers did not play well. They just did not play well at all. I can't say that they did a whole lot of really good. I mean, they did some good things, but there were some things that they did that were a little questionable, and one of them was this. So this is in the third inning, right? Top of the third, and you know, by the time this comes out, you probably have already seen this. But Bellinger hits a home run, and Raimel Tapia actually had it in his glove. He drops it because when he went up to rob the home run, his glove hand hit the top part of the fence, and it knocked the ball loose, and as a result, it was a home run. Bellinger saw it as a home run. Justin Turner was already on base, and so he was running, and he saw that Tapia had, or what he had assumed, caught it. So he immediately turns around and starts running back to first base, but he crossed paths with Cody Bellinger. And so as a result, it nullified Cody Bellinger's home run. Justin Turner was able to score, but Cody Bellinger was actually called out. And so it was a massive just miscue on the Dodgers' part, and especially on Justin Turner's part. At first when you see this, you're kind of like, what in the world? How does somebody that experienced make that kind of mistake? Well, it's Colorado, so the ball carries. So, I mean, Cody Bellinger hit it far, 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 far away. And when you're on the base path and you look up and you see somebody that seems to have caught it, yeah, your first initial reaction is to make it back, because you don't want to kind of think, oh, he must have dropped it, and he didn't. I mean, imagine if he had actually not dropped it and he just kept running, and how foolish he would have looked then. You know, I mean, he was being, I will say, he was being heads up. And, I mean, he probably should have watched it through the entire way, and he should probably have also listened to Cody Bellinger, because Cody Bellinger was literally waving him forward saying it's a home run, it's a home run. But there's nothing you can really do in that situation. But the Rockies, they must have smelt blood after that. I don't know what, but they jumped all over the Dodgers after that. Next inning, it was a huge, huge safety squeeze from Garrett Hampson, scored Owings. Owings had actually a stand-up triple in the bottom of the third, and so Owings put down a nice squeeze bunt. It was a beautiful bunt, right in kind of no man's land on the right side of the field, kind of in between the pitcher's mound and the first baseman. And it was a tough play. I mean, it was a hard play to make. It was not made. Garrett Hampson put down a beautiful bunt. He was actually safe, too. So, as a result, a ginormous run for the Rockies to get things going. And they just kept piling on the runs after that for Clayton Kershaw. He gave up 10 hits. He gave up 10 hits in his outing. And, I mean, they were all over him, right? I mean, they had 4 runs in 5 innings off of Kershaw. He did not get great support. I mean, he had an error by Seager that scored a run. So not the greatest runs, or not the greatest defense behind him, but at the same time, Kershaw did not pitch that great. I mean, you can't really put it all on the defense. I mean, he did not pitch that well at all. And bottom 6, Kershaw let up 3 straight singles right back up the middle each time, one after another, back-to-back singles. And they were all in the same spot. They were all pitches that were in the same spot. And the Rockies hitters, they put them right back on a line, right back at him. And it was kind of interesting. The Rockies looked very good and very aggressive, which is shocking. But what was more shocking was they seemed to have been looking for more contact hits and not really swinging for the fences. And I wonder if we're starting to slowly see the changing in kind of hitting mentality, or the hitting approach for hitters right now, right? Because of all the changes with the baseball and this, that, and the other, there might now be more, and we might start seeing it more singles. We might start seeing guys trying to just, be good contact hitters and not really swinging for the fences anymore. And so I wonder if, again, this is kind of the first signs of this pitch, or of this hitting approach kind of changing. Rockies wound up in a bases-loaded jam in the top of the 9th. They were able to get out of it. And again,
15 hits for the Dodgers, only 5 runs. So not very good production out of them. Not good production at all. And, again, that would, quite frankly, frighten me. I mean, again, I know this is opening day, so you can't really get that all up in arms about things, and I do understand that. But at the same time, you don't want to start the season on the wrong foot, right? And Kershaw did not look very good in his season debut at all. The Dodgers as a whole did not look that great at all. A couple errors, like I mentioned. And again, the Rockies, they just jumped all over them. That was really all it was. They just jumped all over them. They were aggressive from the plate. Pretty solid base running. Again, that big base running miscue by Justin Turner did not help. The Rockies, they wound up winning. I mean, they won in a solid 8-5 game, actually. It was a fun game to watch. It was actually probably my favorite game to watch during the day because of all the different things that happened. And then I would say probably the Blue Jays-Yankees were a close second. I was shocked by the Pirates. I'll get into the Pirates in a little bit, but I was very shocked by the Pirates. But now I want to get into the Houston and Oakland game. From what I watched, a couple innings, pretty quiet through the first 3 innings. It was actually a big pitching duel, I would say. Chris Bassett only gave up 1 hit through 2 innings. Greinke retired the first 8 batters he faced. Greinke is somehow really effective still. I don't know how he does it because his fastball velocity is at an all-time low. From 2019, it was an all-time low, 88 miles an hour compared to in 2010 when it was 94. And what was interesting was, I mean, we have to remind ourselves, Greinke came into the league as a hard-throwing fastball pitcher. And now he's kind of developed into, and he's kind of, again, evolved, and he's been able to adjust with the game into more of an off-speed, many pitching kind of arsenal, if you will, kind of pitcher, right? And he, not to mention, I mean, he's got a great changeup. He's got one of the best changeups in baseball, probably. And how good he is with that changeup, I think, is what's keeping him around and relevant, even though he's getting way up in age. But, again, it was a solid, good solid pitching duel early on, which was always fun to watch. And all of a sudden, though, the Astros, they woke up the bats later on. I mean, 2 runs in the top of the 6th. They had 2 runs in the top of the 8th, and then 3 in the top of the 9th. Wound up beating the A's 8-1. So a huge opening day win for the Astros. But, again, if you're the Athletics, I would not get too hung up on it. Same thing with the Dodgers. Same thing with the Yankees. It's the first day of the season. It was the first game. So you've got 161 more to go, or 100 and however many more to go. But just getting in some other notes, some highlights from around the league from opening day, Miguel Cabrera actually hit the first home run of the 2021 season. It's his 488th career home run, so that's going to be a milestone, and I'm going to do that segment in a couple weeks from now. Milestones to watch this year. There are a lot of milestones to watch. I believe Scherzer is 7 Ks away from 2,000 career Ks. I could be wrong on that, but again, I'm going to do a little bit more of a deep dive later on, but it's a milestone to watch. And Cabrera going to 500 home runs, that's a big milestone to watch. But Shane Bieber in the Tigers-Indians game got absolutely lit up by the Tigers. I mean, he gave up 4 runs in an inning, which he never did that last year. And again, that's his on opening day. But he does become the the second ever pitcher in Indians history behind Bob Feller to ever have 10-plus Ks in consecutive opening day starts. So, again, remember last year he had 13, 14 Ks. Well, he did the same exact thing on opening day, too. But it was, again, exciting to see Miguel Cabrera up swinging and being aggressive. I mean, hey, I know I said he should maybe retire after this year. You get 500 home runs, I don't know, that would probably give me kind of an idea or kind of a clue like, hey, maybe I should just walk away from the game now. But that's just me. So, again, really excited to see what Cabrera's going to do this year. But then going into the Pirates game, Brian Hayes, he looked sensational. I mean, sensational. Great swing, powerful swing, great glove at third base. I mean, listen, living in Pittsburgh, right, you're around a lot of Pittsburgh fans. All of my friends are Pittsburgh fans. My girlfriend's dad is a ginormous Pittsburgh fan, bleeds black and gold. And all you hear nowadays, if you bring up the Pirates around them, the first thing that comes out of their mouth, Key Brian Hayes. It's the first thing they say. It's incredible. It's unbelievable how much impact this player has had on a franchise, and he's literally played like maybe 50 games. I'm not looking at it right now, but maybe 50 career games, and I could be wrong on that. But there's so much promise, and I see it, because before I obviously saw it, but I mean, he really came out strong against the Cubs, had a 2-run homer in the first inning, got things going for the Buccos. Cubs did answer right back. I mean, they knocked around Chad Kuhl, and I think that's going to be the problem with the Pirates all year long. That and a multitude of other things. But their pitching is going to be atrocious. And I think that Brian Reynolds and Ke'Bryan Hayes are going to be the saviors of this team. And again, I don't think they're going to be doing a whole lot of saving. I mean, I have a running joke with my friends right now that I think the Pirates can get 62 wins this year. I really do, because some people, I think the Caesars Sports betting book had them at 58.5 as the over-under. I would really hit that over. I think that they could get 62, but it wouldn't be much over the over, if you will. But I think that the fielding was not very good either. I mean, they were throwing the ball around the infield. They're just a mess. They are. And I hate to say that because, and I am a huge Brewers fan, so as a result, it's like, well, I'm glad I don't have to worry about them. And it's always nice when the Brewers come into town because, my friends and I will go to the game, and I'm the one Brewers fan, and everyone's like, oh boy, we're with the Brewers fan. But at the same time, I think Ke'Bryan Hayes is going to be a centerpiece for this Pirates team unless they decide to unload him too, which I think that would be the worst move that they could possibly do. If they are smart, they build this team around Ke'Bryan Hayes for the future. And if they're smart, in the offseason or whenever he's up for arbitration or whenever his contract is up, they sit him down and say, we are going to build this team around you. You are going to be the center of this team. Because the guy has that much potential, and he's got that much talent. I really do believe that. He's a very, very good player. And what's also interesting, and it's, again, another issue, the Pirates had 2 men on and no outs for the first 5 innings, in each of the first 5 innings, and they still only amassed 4 runs out of that. They wound up winning 5-3. But, I mean, that's leaving so many runners on base, and that's a huge pet peeve of mine in baseball, is when teams leave runners on base. I really can't stand that, and I don't think that should ever happen, especially if you have 2 or 3 men on and it's no outs. You should be able to drive in one of those runs unless you're going up against a pitcher that is just not missing his spots that day. At the end of the day, though, the Pirates, they got the win. They got the opening day win, and I think it's going to be one of a few that they're going to have. I hate to say that, but it was a nice promising sign on the first day of the season that they got in the W column. Again, I don't root for the Pirates, but I always hope that they do well because they don't necessarily challenge my team as much. Now, if they were challenging my team, I would not want them to do well at all. But, again, right now where they're at, I kind of just, I'd like them to do well. I'd like them to be on the positive side of things, not the negative side of things. But then just running through some other things in the league, Royals and Rangers combining for 24 total runs. They combined for 10 runs and 11 hits in just the first inning. So there's kind of an example of very different hitting approaches, or at least just great offense on both sides for the Rangers and the Royals. But then the Braves, Phillies, Pablo Sandoval had a 2-home run bomb for the Braves. I mean, where did he come from, right? I mean, I forgot. I remember vaguely when I did my segment on which players should retire after the season. I remember saying Pablo Sandoval, and maybe he shouldn't. Maybe he should stick around because that might be an interesting pickup and an interesting player for the Braves. But then getting in in that same game, Gene Segura wound up walking off for the Phillies. And then into the Brewers game, I want to touch on this briefly. Brewers were down most of the game against the Twins. Get in the bottom of the 9th. Travis Shaw, who I think this is a huge redemption year for him because he's struggled the last few years in the MLB, both with the Blue Jays and with the Brewers. This is a great start for him. I think it was a 1-out double. 1-out double, scores 2 runs, ties the game up at 5-5 in the bottom 9th. And then they wind up winning in the bottom of the 10th. Orlando Arcia hit this really hard hit, high grounder off the edge of the plate, bounces up, second baseman comes charging in, Kane slides in, beautiful slide by Kane, mind you. I mean, completely avoided the tag, slid on the outside half of the plate, was in safe. They won on that fielder's choice, so it was a ginormous win for them. And then getting into the Padres and Diamondbacks game, Padres did wind up winning, but Darvish gave up a ton of runs. And the Diamondbacks had 4 homers in the 5th inning, couple off of him. So a really, really big day for the Padres, but a huge day for the Diamondbacks in terms of just confidence booster. I mean, 4 homers in an inning, that's a lot. That's pretty hard to do. But all in all, a great day of opening day baseball, and it was great over the weekend, Sunday night baseball, and we've just got it from here on out the rest of the way, so I'm really excited for that. But, folks, that's going to close things out here for us on our second segment in the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial, I'm going to give my predictions of who I could see being in the first-place spot in each division come the All-Star break and which teams are going to have the best early starts to the year. It's been a lot of fun so far, but we got a lot more to go, so don't change that channel. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be, visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all here still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again. And in the previous segment, I got right into discussing a recap and a breakdown of the opening day games, and I shared what I saw from the first day of games on the first day of the season. And I want to now get into predicting which teams I could see being in first place of their respective divisions by the All-Star break, and who could be the early leaders in their division. So I'll go through each division, and I'll discuss why I think that team will be in first place by the All-Star break, but I don't necessarily think they'll be in first place by the end of the season. So in the AL East, I personally think the Yankees will be in first place by that point. I think they're a team that will start out very strong. I know that they kind of started off a little bit slow, but again, I think they'll pick things up. It's a very, very good team. Gary Sanchez, Gleyber Torres both lost considerable amount of weight, and they looked like they've got their swings back in the shape. Gary Sanchez, again, with that opening day homer, I'm sure that's really kind of got his confidence up at a very high level right now. I will say the Yankees need to have hitters perform the way they should. I do fear that this Yankees team at times will underperform. Judge and Stanton give me this feeling of they are very hot and cold. They are very, oh yeah, they're hitting really well today, and then the next day not hitting well at all. They'll either go 4 for 4 with 2 doubles, and then the next day they'll go 0 for 5 with 3 strikeouts, right? And I will say I think that, I mean, it's a toss-up on who I think is a better hitter. I think they're both very comparable hitters. I worry that they're going to be underperforming at some point this year. I think that some of these teams, and again, this is something to watch for all teams, they all are going to be pretty much gassed probably by the All-Star break. So could we start seeing fatigue really start to set in by the middle part of the season, and the latter half of the season it's just kind of a big mess because players are not used to playing 162 games in the last 2 years. So I do kind of worry if the Yankees will underperform due to that. They do have a lot of guys on their team that are coming off of big-time injuries and, again, have not really been playing in the majors much, like Corey Kluber, Jameson Taillon, a couple of their guys on the mound, and I do worry about that a little bit. Their bullpen, though, I have been very impressed with. So I think that their offensive capabilities, which, again, are very high because they've got a lot of guys that can hit. I mean, Gleyber Torres can hit. You've got Gio Urshela who can hit. You've got Giancarlo Stanton who can hit. Clint Frazier can hit. Aaron Judge can hit. Gary Sanchez, Luke Voit, the list goes on and on and on. They all can hit. It's a very good team. And I think that their bullpen was kind of a big-time, it was a pleasant surprise. I worry about their rotation a little bit because, again, it's a little banged up, and I just worry that they're going to be underperformers. And the Blue Jays really went toe-to-toe with them. I mean, the Blue Jays, I think, are going to give them a run for their money. The Rays, I don't know what to think of them. Again, they're a team that I think they just rely too much on defense. They rely too much on pitching. They rely too much on the bullpen. And they don't really emphasize the offense. I mean, they beat the Marlins on opening day 1-0 off of Austin Meadows' homer. That was about it. That was really like the only serious offense. And so that's why I worry if the Rays are going to give them a run for their money. But I think the Blue Jays are going to definitely push the envelope a little bit and really be nipping at the heels of the Yankees. But I think by the All-Star break, the Yankees will be in first place. I don't think it will be a large margin. I think it will be a very, very close kind of difference between them and whomever is going to be in second. But we have to kind of just monitor how these teams that are coming off of, and again, the Yankees, they played further along into the year than most teams did last year because they were in the playoffs. But at the same time, that means a shorter offseason. So could we see fatigue set in earlier? We'll have to see. But I do have them being in first place by the All-Star break. For the AL Central, I'm going to go with the Twins. Even though they fell on opening day to the Brewers, I still was very impressed with just their overall lineup. Luis Arias, great player. Nelson Cruz, great player. Angelton Simmons had a couple hits in his Twins debut. This is a good team. This is a very, very good team. And I think that the White Sox are going to suffer without Eloy Jimenez. I think not having Eloy Jimenez in the lineup is definitely going to be a problematic thing for them. I really do believe that because he brings so much offense for them. And you have to hope that Yohan Moncada is going to bring that same offense and kind of replace it a little bit because he really lacked in that offensive category last year. And so I think the Twins, they can start out strong. And again, the Twins are a first-half team. Let's remind ourselves, this Twins team, they will come storming out of the gates. But then come August, September, they really start to plateau. So this is a team that I think will have probably one of the stronger starts out of the teams that I think are going to be in first place by the All-Star break. But I do think that they're going to be one of the few teams that winds up either plateauing or faltering towards the end of the year, not necessarily losing their first-place foothold, but I could see them being challenged significantly by the White Sox. Again, Eloy Jimenez being out does do a lot of things to that, but they still have Jose Abreu. They still have Nick Madrigal. They still have Tim Anderson. They still have all the pitching that they have. Lucas Giolito, Dallas Keuchel, Lance Lynn. You know, they've got Yasmani Grandal. I mean, they've got a lot of guys that are going to do a lot of things, and I know that it's just one player, but he does have a big impact, but it's just one player. We have to remind ourselves of that. And I have to say the Twins have also improved the bullpen pitching. They lost a lot of guys in free agency. I know that Randy Dobnak came out of the bullpen and wound up getting the loss against the Brewers. But you know what? I think they've got a lot of guys that can play really, really well. I think they've got a lot of guys that can perform. And I think that it's a team that is just they are one piece away, or they're one game away, or they're always the bridesmaid, but never the bride. They're right there, but they're never getting to the finish line. And I want to see them get to that finish line. I want to see them get over that hump and really, take that jump of development and say, hey, we're gonna win this division this year, and we're gonna get out of the first round of the playoffs. So I do have them being in first place by the All-Star break, but again, by the end of the year, I don't know if that's going to happen. Now, getting to the AL West, I'm going to say the Astros are going to be in first place. But this is another one that I don't really know how confident I am in this because I think the Angels are going to challenge them significantly. I think that with the healthy Shohei Ohtani for the Angels, it does a lot of different things. And now you have Jose Iglesias. Now you have, and again, you have Anthony Rendon. You obviously also have Mike Trout. And I think, and the pitching has gotten a little bit better too. I think that this Angels team will challenge teams like the Astros and the A's, and then not to mention the A's. I mean, they've got all of the pieces that they have, right? I mean, they do have a couple guys that are on the injured list right now, but their pitching has been strong, and it always is strong. Matt Chapman, Matt Olson, they might be one of the most feared 3-4 hitters in all of baseball. And, I mean, this is the Athletics are a good team, but the Astros have impressed me, I will say. I again, continue to get very impressed with them because just their offense is still very strong. I mean, beating up on the A's 8-1 on opening day. I mean, that's a perfect example. And they did re-sign some guys, Lance McCullers. They did re-sign Michael Brantley. I just wonder about this team because I think that there's one thing that could really kind of pull kind of the tablecloth off the table, if you will, and have the glass go flying. And it's just one player getting traded I think they're one player being traded away or off that team away from having that happen. Whether it's Carlos Correa, whether it's Jose Altuve, whether it's Zach Greinke, whether it's whomever, I think what's going to happen is this. I think the Astros are going to start strong, and then at some point they're going to start fizzling out. I think that they're going to wind up struggling, and they're going to wind up having to unload some guys just to get any sort of pieces for the future and try and get some incentive back. Guys like Carlos Correa, whose contract is up at the end of the year. Now, the other aspect of it is I could see them also maybe just saying, hey, we're going to band together one last run. Let's show everybody that we can win without cheating, and let's get to the World Series. And so maybe there might be a little bit more of a sense of urgency out of this team that time is ticking, and they are against the clock because Carlos Correa, he's been public saying he doesn't really know if he's going to re-sign. From what I've heard and what I've read, contract negotiations and contract extensions with him, those conversations have not been going in the direction that the Astros want. So as a result, I do think that the Astros, they might have a little bit of an issue on their hands if they don't go far this year, if they don't go to the World Series. So I think that they might start realizing that, and as a result, the players could start playing with a little bit of more of a sense of urgency, like I said. But I definitely think that this is a year where other teams' talent is starting to rival the Astros. I don't want to say it's the exact same, but it's starting to creep up closer and closer to them, and they're starting to make a little bit more headway, if you will. So I do have the Astros being in first place by the All-Star break, but I'm not confident on that. But I'm gonna go ahead with them. So over in the NL now, we'll get in the NL East in particular, the New York Mets. And, I mean, what is there to say, right? I mean, this is who I think is going to be in first place by the All-Star break. The Mets are the Mets. They're a great team. They're a great team, and at least on paper, right? I mean, at least on paper, they're a great team. And so that's the one thing I do wonder, if they're going to underperform like the Yankees. But I don't think so. I think because they've got so much talent, and they're so balanced between hitting and pitching, and they're so balanced in talent, and they're so deep with talent, with that same mixture of talent, that I really find it hard for them to falter or to have any sort of struggles, really, because of just how deep they are as a team. I do think that the Braves can push them. I do think that the Phillies could. I do think the Nationals could. The Mets are going to have the most competition out of any team in the MLB in fighting for first place. There's no question about that. They will not have no other conference will have, or no other division will have any sort of competition like the Mets have. Nobody. Not one person. And so I do wonder if the Mets will be challenged and if they will wind up being in first place. I do think that they will be by come, All-Star break, but I'm not totally sure on that. So getting into now the NL Central, I personally have the Cubs. I know that kind of sounds shocking, a tough start to the season, but having the Chicago Cubs at first place, it does sound likely because very similar to the Astros, they've got a lot of guys on that team that, again, are still from that 2016 team, but at the same time is ticking. They've got guys that are going to be free agents. They've got guys that are going to have their contracts up soon. Time is ticking. And so as a result, you don't really know, what's going to happen or whatever, right? I mean, you have no idea what's going to happen. So as a result, I do think that they could have also a sense of urgency. They could have kind of this want to try and make a last run at it and try and make a last push towards it because they still have Rizzo, they still have Baez, they still have Contreras, they still have all the guys that they have. I do worry about their pitching and if that can hold up really because they got rid of Yu Darvish, and I mean, yeah, they've got Zach Davies, and he does a good job, but I mean, they need to have a little bit more, right? They need to have a little bit more. And Kyle Hendricks does an all right job. I will give him that. He's a good pitcher. But I do think that the Cubs will also be pushed by the Cardinals. I think they'll also be pushed by the Brewers. And I honestly, my second team that I could see being in first place by the All-Star break is the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals started off very strong. I've got to give them a lot of credit. I think that they're going to be a very good team this year. Some big-time ads, as we know, in the offseason. But again, the Cubs are coming off a tough year, so that's going to be really hard for them to bounce back from. But again, you could use that as kind of leverage or kind of motivation to really try and push forward and push into, the playoffs and in the World Series and so on and so forth. So getting into the last team in the last division that I'm predicting to be in first place by the All-Star break, the NL West, call me crazy, I'm going with the Padres. Honestly, the Padres and the Dodgers both did not look great on opening day. They did not look that great. Yu Darvish got rocked, Clayton Kershaw got rocked, and, I mean, the Diamondbacks pushed the Padres a little bit, and the Rockies beat the Dodgers. So maybe we'll see other teams getting more involved. Again, it's the first couple days of the season, so you don't want to kind of come swinging out with all sorts of just speculation or whatever. So I think the Padres are definitely going to be a team that continues to or at least build their way up into a strong team. In the first half of last year, they came out really strong. Fernando Tatis came out really strong. And I think they are kind of similar to the Twins where they're starting out very strong, and I do wonder if they're going to plateau at some point. But like the Mets, they've got so much talent, and they're so deep, and they've got such a wide range of talent and such a huge balance of talent. And so I do wonder if this Padres team, they're going to have a great season, they go to the playoffs, and they don't know what to do. Now, they do have playoff experience somewhat from last year, so that is a good thing. But, I mean, I think that if you watch how the Padres kind of trend forward for the rest of this year, it's going to be an interesting watch. It's going to be an interesting thing to see because they've got so much talent. It's very young. They don't have necessarily a bunch of players that are, I would say, in tune with going deep into the playoffs. They don't have anybody really on their team that has that kind of experience. So you have to assume that, if they're thinking they're going to win now, I don't know. I think that maybe winning in the next 2 or 3 years is more realistic. They get a little bit more experience under their belt. And again, their franchise player has not even technically played a full 162-game season. He hasn't even played that in parts of 2 seasons. So as a result, you have to kind of give them a little bit of leeway here. And I think that maybe at times there's some unfair kind of, I don't want to say pressure, but some unfair kind of ideas or just expectations, if you will, for this team. And so I do think that they'll be in first place by the All-Star break. I think that they're going to make a big run. I think they're going to have a strong start. But I do think the Dodgers, they're creeping right there. And I could see the Dodgers being in first place by the All-Star break. So those are the teams I have being in first place in the All-Star break. The Padres, and then the Cubs, and then also the Mets, Astros, Twins, and Yankees. But we'll have to see if that is going to stay true not only to the All-Star break, but for the rest of the season. So that'll do it for this segment, folks. Thanks again for sticking around. Stay right there. We'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, where I'll discuss which players that could be on the trading block and on new teams come trade deadline time. Don't go anywhere, everyone, because we've got one last segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup final.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you. And in the previous segment, I got into sharing who I could see sitting in first place by the midway point of the year in each respective division and which teams could see some of the strongest starts in 2021. And I want to wrap up today's show discussing which players I could see being on the move and being traded by the trade deadline this year and which teams they could potentially land on, actually. So I'm going to run through a couple players, and some of these names have constantly appeared in trade talks, and I would honestly see them being traded earlier than later. First player, Chris Bryant. And I know I just got out of a segment talking about the Cubs and thinking that they're going to make a last hurrah run. Well, if that's not the case, I could see Chris Bryant being traded. It's an idea that has not been far-fetched at all, and it's actually an idea that goes back further than just this past offseason. I mean, a couple years ago, they've constantly had trade talks with Chris Bryant in the mix and possibly having him dealt. I remember last year during the trade deadline, there was discussion of them trading Chris Bryant over to the Red Sox, but something went wrong. So he's constantly in trade talks. He's a free agent after the season. He had a terrible year in 2020, batted .206, but again, he's a former MVP. He's a 3-time All-Star. He's a guy that's had a lot of success, right? I mean, he's a guy that has a ton of power, a ton of talent, and he's a very, very, very good hitter. And so as a result, I do wonder if the Cubs wind up trading him, what are they going to get for him? I think they're going to get a lot. I think they would get a ton, actually, for him. And I do wonder if they're going to go in the route of getting prospects or if they're going to go in the route of getting another player. Not really sure. But I do think that, if he doesn't perform well, then they might try and get rid of him sooner rather than later. Try and get rid of him and get as much as they can or get the best that they can for him before his value starts to deteriorate with his talent. But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, the guy's got a lot of ability, and he's coming off a tough year. But you know what? There's a lot of players that had tough years last year. There was a ton of players. It was a constant theme. It was a tough year in general. And so as a result, I really think that this will be a different year for him. I think this will be a different season for them. And I do think that he will get traded. Where, I don't know. But the two teams I could see him maybe getting traded to, and I'm going to have this one team on this list for a lot because this team is losing a lot in the offseason, and I could see them being ginormous buyers, and it's the Giants. I really could see the Giants being a team that go after Chris Bryant, put him at third, put him in the outfield, put him somewhere, because this team, and a couple of players are on this list actually that could get traded. Brandon Belt, Jeff Samardzija, Brandon Crawford. All of these guys that are going to be free agents soon, their contracts are up soon. They could be dealt before, just so they don't have to, worry about re-signing or, whatever it might be, and they can actually get something in exchange for them instead of just letting them walk in free agency and not really getting anything for them. So the Giants I could see, but then also the Braves. I could see the Braves getting him. I think the Braves, if the Braves want to go all in this year, and if the Braves wind up challenging the Mets for first place come trade deadline, I could see the Braves making a move like that in order to push themselves over the top and maybe push themselves in the World Series. They are just literally one player, I think, away from really solidifying that, because they've got a lot of talent as it is. And that's the thing. They already had talent. The Mets didn't. The Mets had to go out and get a bunch of talent. They started developing talent as time went on, but the Braves have had talent for quite some time. And I think the Braves are due for getting somebody like Chris Bryant. Now, they would have to unload quite a bit. And I don't know what they'd be willing to give up. And, maybe you get rid of Dansby Swanson. Maybe you get rid of a prospect or two. Maybe you get rid of a catcher. I don't know. It would be interesting to see what they would trade for. But I think Chris Bryant is going to be on the move before we know it. And I would love to see where he's going to wind up, because he's a very talented player. And he's, quite frankly, going to probably improve any team's roster tenfold wherever he lands. So the next player I want to get into, Brandon Belt, another player I think that, again, he'll be a free agent after this year. You might not get as much for him as you would, say, Chris Bryant, obviously, but he brings experience. He brings leadership. A 10-year veteran. He's been around the league for a while. He's coming off a pretty strong year. He's been an all-star before, so he's accomplished. He batted .309 last season. He had a 1.015 OPS, all career highs. And yeah, it was a shortened season. He played 40, 50 games, but still, he was able to put together a very strong outing for an entire season. And I think that he's somebody that gets dealt sooner rather than later. Because let's face it, right? You don't want to have a player like that walk in free agency and you wind up not getting anything for them, and they kind of are just like, yeah, that's it. Because let's face it, right? The guy's talented. He's talented, but he's old. He's getting older. He's an aging star, and as a result, you don't want to have that aging star leave and you don't get any compensation back and you don't get any incentive for your future. So I don't know where he would maybe land. Maybe he'd land with the Twins. I don't know. That would be kind of an interesting place for him to go. I'm trying to think of some other teams that he could potentially land on. I don't really think that there's not many teams that I think are in the massive market for a player like Belt. Maybe he goes to a team like the Rays, adds a little bit of experience and adds a little bit of he was part of some of those World Series teams, so he brings some experience, he brings some leadership, and I think that's something that the Rays are missing right now, is an experienced, leader for them to guide, for them to be guided by. But I really don't know where he would get dealt to. But I think that the Twins and the Rays, those would be interesting, obviously, and it just would be another curious case of what they would get in return, what those teams would get in return. And then getting into Brandon Crawford, his infield mate, another player that's going to be a free agent in 2 years, and he's a little bit older than Brandon Belt. And so I do wonder if the Giants start seeing him deteriorate quicker, they try to get rid of him faster so they don't have to have him walk in free agency and they're stuck paying him for this year and next year and he doesn't perform for them, right? He's 34 years old, so by the time he's off contract, he'll be 36. And he batted .256 last year, but the season before, he batted .228, and that was a season he played in a full-scale season. He didn't play in all 162 games, but he played in 140 of them. And so, you're playing in 80% of the games, you're batting .228, it's not really a great sign. But 2 years before that, he had batted .250 and above for about 3 consecutive seasons. So as a result, he's an average hitter, he's a good glove, he's got experience, he comes from the World Series winning Giants teams from the early 2010s. He's just got average power. But through 54 games last year, I will say, he had 8 home runs. And then in 2019, he had 11 home runs in 147 games. So he was on a pretty good pace last year. If he was only 3 homers shy of his season high the year before, and he was, again, only 54 games in, imagine if he had played a whole season. And so maybe he's going to start playing well. Maybe he's on an uptick. He had a career high last year in OPS plus at 117, so brings a good quick bat. I personally could see the Indians trading for him because, again, they need somebody to fill that spot over at short. I know they have Ahmad Rosario right now, but let's face it, right? They're going to want somebody. They're going to want somebody with experience. They're going to want somebody with some sort of experience. They could move Rosario over to second or something, and I could also see maybe the Rockies. This is a team that is going to have, I would say, Trevor Story off their team sooner rather than later. I think that he's going to be a free agent. I think he will walk after the season, and as a result, I do wonder if if the Rockies are going to want to go out and get somebody that's experienced. I know that he's not going to be at the height of his career, but you never know. You never know. So I could see Brandon Crawford going to those two teams, but now getting into Trevor Story, speaking of Trevor Story, he's going to be a huge name to follow in next year's free agency. Ginormous name for players and teams to follow. I mean, he could be one of the bigger players that is on the move at some point or another. And if anyone trades for him, they're going to be, I think, in a big win-now mode. You have to be, right? I mean, the guy's got so much power. He hit 35-plus homers in 2018 and 2019. Great glove. I mean, he's a hard-hitting shortstop. I mean, he could be traded for major pieces or just tons of prospects, honestly. One of the two. You could get a lot for him. And this Rockies team, they have a depleted farm system right now, so they could maybe want to go out and get some pieces that are going to bolster that and try and change that and try and help that out a little bit because, let's face it, right, the Rockies are not that great of a team. I know they played well against the Dodgers, but they're not that great of a team. And so you have to think that, all right, we should just get rid of Story. We don't want to have to pay him. We don't want to have him walk in free agency, and we don't get anything for this really talented player. So let's trade him by the trade deadline, deal him off to somebody else. And again, it would be a team that's in a win-now mode. It's a team that is going to try and go all in this year, literally this year. So teams that would be wanting to go all in this year, if you're looking at them, the Reds. And the reason why I picked the Reds is this. I think they missed out on their mark last year, and I think that they know that. I think they blew their chance. Now, if they go out and get a guy like Trevor Story, it's like, okay, they're back into the swing of things. They're back in the mix a little bit. They've already got good pitching. They've got strong pitching. Even though Trevor Bauer left, their pitching is still strong. It's a matter of the rest of their hitting, and I do wonder about that because Moustakas can be hot and cold. Castellanos can be average, and then he can skyrocket, and then he can be average again. I think they need somebody to keep everything consistent and at a high level, and I think Story will do that. They would have to unload a lot. They would have to unload a ton, probably. But I could also see him maybe going to the Rays. I mean, this would be kind of a real harebrained idea, but I could see that happening because they have so many prospects to offer up. And as a result, I could see them maybe wanting to offer up a prospect or two and getting Trevor Story and trying to go in a win-now mode. But at the same time, I don't know if Trevor Story is going to be that guy that takes him to the promised land. I don't know if it's just him that's going to do it. I think they might need more than just him. And they do have, and the Rays do have the number one overall prospect in their farm system, Wander Franco. He is a shortstop, so that would be interesting. But at the same time, I don't know if the Rockies are going to do that because the Rockies are just an oddly ran team in management, personally, I think. But then I also think the Giants, again, the Giants are going to be on this list quite a bit, mainly because they're going to need a shortstop at one point or another. And again, they've got a lot of guys that are going to be up for free agency. They've got a lot of guys that are going to be up for off their contract. And so as a result, I could see them going after some shortstops in this free agents market. Not to mention, they're going to have a lot of cap room to do that, so they can sign somebody big. So, don't be shocked if that winds up happening. Now, the next player, and I hate to say this, but he's always in trades talk, similar to Chris Bryant, Josh Hader. And he could be used as a huge piece in a big transaction. I mean, if this Brewers team, they're in an interesting spot. They're in a very, very interesting spot. They've got a lot of talented players. They made a couple pretty solid moves, I would say, in the offseason. And if they go out and use Hader as a trade piece, well, they could get a player that really pushes them into maybe, I don't want to say World Series contention. I mean, that might be a little aggressive, but, a deeper playoff run kind of team. Right now, I think that they're a team that could fight for playoffs and could make it. Do I think that they could go deep? Maybe. But at the same time, if they went out and got somebody for Josh Hader that was another bat and then like a solid relief guy, I mean, hey, this could be a really good Brewers team. Because their starting pitching solid. I think that their starting pitching across the board is good. Brandon Woodruff is good. Corbin Burns is good. They've had some good arms that have performed well for them the last few years. I know they don't have Jeremy Jeffress anymore, and he was a great piece for them coming out of the bullpen in 2018. But, let's face it, right? His numbers have been outstanding. So Josh Hader is a very attractive player for a lot of teams. 37 saves in 2019. He had a career high in 3.7 ERA last year, so not a great ERA for his standards. But before that, his ERA was never at 3. It was never above 3. And he's a hard thrower. Again, somebody that's going to jack up a lot of Ks, had 138 Ks in 2019, had 143 in 2018. I could see him going to the Blue Jays. I could see the Blue Jays saying, hey, we've got a little bit of what the Brewers want, maybe an extra bat here and there. Maybe they go out and get somebody like Vlad Jr. for first base. Who knows? And you trade Josh Hader, and now this Blue Jays team's in a totally different ballpark because essentially they haven't really not that well. Their bullpen impressed me, but their closing, Kirby Yates isn't there. He's going to be injured the entire year. So them getting Josh Hader, I think, makes them such a World Series contender. It would make a lot of sense. And then the Phillies, obviously, because, well, let's face it, the Phillies had one of the worst bullpens in the last 90 years a season ago. So they're going to definitely want something, and they've got players that they could offer up to the Brewers as well. It would be interesting. I don't know if Josh Hader is going to actually get traded, but if he does, I would love to see what he gets traded for. So my last two players, I'm going to get into Jose Ramirez first and then Carlos Correa. Ramirez, I think he could get dealt because I think the Indians are just in a big rebuild mode right now. And I think that having Ramirez, it's a waste of his time. It's a waste of the Indians' time. They're having to pay him, and we already saw it with Lindor. I think that was kind of the beginning to the end of this Indians team. They're going to start unloading guys, and I think Ramirez is the next to go. I mean, he had a great year last year. He was an MVP candidate, 292 batting average, 17 homers, 58 games he played in. He's had 3 straight years of 20-plus homers in each of the last 3 seasons prior to 2020. He's a 2-time All-Star. And again, they can get a lot for him. I mean, his home run percentage was at an all-time high last year at over 6%. So he's on a good uptick in his career. And again, I could see him going to the Giants. I could see him actually going to the Angels, oddly enough. I could see the Angels saying, you know what, let's get one more piece. Let's try and make some big trade, some big transaction, and get somebody that is going to really push us over the edge and make us compete with teams like the Astros and the Athletics. And I think Ramirez would do just that for the Angels. And then the Cardinals. And the reason why I picked the Cardinals is this. I think the Cardinals are assuming that Goldschmidt and Arenado are going to take them to the promised land. And I think they're going to find out very quickly that you can't just rely on 2 players. Look at a team like the Yankees. They initially were trying to rely on Stanton and Judge. Well, it didn't really work, so they had to go out and get other players. And it's still not working. They still haven't made it to the World Series. So that doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything. But at the same time, I think that the Cardinals would benefit greatly amongst the other competitors in the division if they got Ramirez. I mean, that would separate them, I think, a little bit in some regards. I just think that the Indians are in a rebuild mode, and it would be wise for them to get rid of Ramirez sooner rather than later. And especially if he's having a good year, you can get a lot for him, and you can try and rebuild that farm system a little bit. You can try and rebuild this team a little bit. So I could see him on the move. And then Carlos Correa, he's going to be an interesting one. And the reason why is because he does not seem like he will re-sign after this year. I mean, he's mentioned it on social media. He's mentioned it in interviews. He's kind of just letting it ride out and see what happens. And so I wonder if he's it's an unofficial tryout for the Astros to see if Correa wants to stick around more. If they perform well, if they go far, yeah, I could see maybe re-signing because he's already seen Brantley re-sign. He's seen McCullers re-sign. And I know that George Springer didn't re-sign, but at the same time, Correa could say, hey, you know what, that's one less person I have to compete with in the batting lineup. I can still stick around and I can be part of this really good team. That's if they go far. If they don't do very well, I would get rid of Correa sooner rather than later. Again, you want to get rid of guys that are going to be free agents at the end of the year if either they're not playing well or if you're not playing well, because it's like, hey, we either get rid of him now and get something for him, or he walks in free agency and we get absolutely Jack Diddley. And you don't want to get Jack Diddley for a player that's really, really good. And so I do think that at the end of the day, Correa could be dealt. I don't know what the chances are of that. I think that they have to probably play it out and see how things go in, June and July. But come the middle of July, I mean, I would pay very close attention to what Correa is going to do and what the Astros are going to do with Correa. And where I could see him going, well, again, the Giants, right? I mean, he's a guy that had 20-plus homers in 4 of his first 5 years in the MLB. His first 3 years in the MLB, he was above a 120 OPS plus. Now, his numbers have not been that great the last 2 years. He's kind of struggled a little bit here and there. He's got a great glove, too, and he's a really good playoff hitter. That's the thing. That's what's intriguing about him. He's a very good playoff bat. And a team that wants to go all in, and at that point of the trade deadline, it's kind of make or break. It's either we go all in or we kind of wait until next year. And so teams that might want to go all in and try and make their final run, I could see them going after Correa. And again, the Giants would be a very likely landing spot for him. I would not be shocked if he went there. I don't want to guarantee that. And I don't think the Giants are in a win now mode. They're not necessarily we have to win right now. maybe the Cardinals, right? I mean, Colton Wong not there anymore. Somebody to play alongside Paul DeJong, maybe. Who knows? But it's going to be very interesting. I think that there could be a lot of shakeups come trade deadline. But folks, as always, it's been a pleasure, and that's going to wrap it up for us here today. Thank you again for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review that really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we'd really appreciate that. And until next time, everybody, thanks so much for joining in, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.